So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us this morning. So, you are highly recommended to take these earphones because then the listening quality is a lot better.
Definitely.
I may introduce you to the fabulous artist, Tarek Atoui. So great that you're here. So great that you all did these things for us. And maybe you were present yesterday night. It was awesome. The house was packed, and everybody loved this guy. I was really envious.
Thank you so much.
So we have a very tiny.
Yes, we
boy.
Young audience.
The
Maybe we should
youngest
give
one.
him the headphones too, no?
Yeah. And I don't know if you noticed, because we are talking about listening. I don't know if you noticed that he started to cry. And this is an experience I have had a lot here in the building. So the youngest one, you know, they really immediately start to cry from enthusiasm. And this has something to do with the specific acoustics here. And they test themselves. So it's wonderful to know this. And we are talking about listening, we are talking about acoustics, we are talking about self-perception.
Right. Right. No, like, no, I don't mind it at all. I love it. Please rest assured. Kids are welcome. Even so, the kid
Another one here.
in pink with the ears closed, although there was no sound, I appreciate it a lot. It's a very... second floor. Okay, great. Wow. Fantastic. The complex piece. Fantastic. But yes, listening, this invitation to listen here and on this exhibition and like the different experiences of listening, this invitation to come to spend time here and hopefully to return and like explore it again and again, because the way I approached it and the way I thought about it is also something that gives a renewed experience, or like each time you come to it somehow. There is a first encounter with the work and then a second encounter and different layers of engaging with it, let's say. I think like when you come a first time here and like you listen to things, you can take it as a whole in what I call, in a very nice way, naive listening. Naive listening is listening without analysis or without like having the mind kind of analyze, separate, examine the different components.
And without any prejudice.
And without any prejudice.
And expectations even, right?
Exactly, and without any explications. So this precisely justifies why there are no labels. There is no text on the walls. There is everything is in a booklet, in a paper you can carry with you and hold, and that you can look at if you feel you need to know more. And it is to allow the situation of naive listening, which is how I started to relate to sound and understand music. Naive listening is something that kind of counterbalances this, what we call analytical listening. And it's like the listening of experts or those who know music, that those who, when they hear something, they immediately dismantle it and examine it. Like what, for instance, those who, let's take classical music, for example, are able to distinguish the horn section from the string section from the different components of the orchestra.
I remember Adorno always complaining about the loss of what he called structural listening. He was convinced that this is a loss of culture, but on the other hand, he was a highly elitist thinker about music, you know.
Yes, for sure. Like this requires training, you know, and this requires an education somehow in music or in sound practices that allow you to engage intellectually with musical or sonic discourse. And it's a great attitude if you have the chance to have it. You see, not everybody has access to a similar education. You see, like from where I came in Beirut, and like having grown like born in the 80s and like childhood through the civil war, there were no conservatories or like institutions where we had access to this kind of knowledge, you know. So we had to, like, the way I dealt with music and sound was very naive, you see, and like very a simple way of taking it as it is. And I think it is an attitude that allowed me to relate to the world and to deal with the world in a very human way. And you see, like, having started like this, it made it for me very easy to communicate with others. And this is what made my work also, and the educational component of my work, so present and important to me, is that I truly believe that from this naive listening, you can unfold and develop a lot, and where everybody is an expert when it comes to sound. You see, there is not the knowledgeable and the less knowledgeable. I truly now believe that everybody has a say in sound, and everybody's opinion or everybody's impressions and feedback on it is valuable. Expert or not, amateur or not, deaf or hearing, for me, all these have the same relevance when it comes to sound and speaking about it.
And this little square here has something to do with it, because this is basically a workshop area. It's an educational area.
Yes, indeed. Like what happened in my case, you see, like I studied, I came to sound at the age of 18, first as a DJ. And 2 years after, I went to sound studies and had the chance to have access in France to a program of sound art and electroacoustic music. And I was with the experts. You see, I was in a class with experts who came from musicology, from fine arts, from composing. And I was the only one who came from outsider's background. And of course, I worked a lot and I had to catch up on a lot of notions I had to learn, and it was possible because of my love of abstraction and math and science. I was good at this, and that's how I understood music and like sound first, as physics and abstraction. And the works of Cage and like Xenakis and Stockhausen were like very liberating to me, in a sense of like saying, oh, we can all make sound, you know, as long as we have an idea and we want to transmit something. You see, it's really not about how you want to do it, but what you want to say.
And how would you conceive the relation between language and sound?
Oh, that's a complicated question.
I know.
Language and sound,
because we are talking. You were talking about discourse in musicology and so on.
Yes. No, like for me, it's a language. Like sound is sound is a universe on its own, and from it you can make language. You see, like it's more than language, because sound is like beyond language in the sense that it addresses conscious and unconscious parts in us. You see, and the way it goes into us is inexplainable. You cannot share like you cannot describe sounds sometimes with words. You see, like the human vocabulary lacks terms and lacks descriptions when it comes to describing how we perceive a sound or what is its impact on us. Like our first relationship to the world, you see, when we are fetuses in our mother's wombs, is sound, is this vibration we get like in our as a babies.
As a being, yeah.
As beings.
Yeah.
And therefore there is a psychosomatic thing to it that is beyond language. You see, like when you hear a bass sound or when you hear like an abstract sound, it brings you back to beyond memories, let's say. It brings you back to something that is really Tellurian, that is really primitive somehow. And these are corners and things I like to tap into also in the way I compose spaces, in the way I put sounds together and think compositions in an architecture or a space.
But it is not just a memory of like what is hidden in us in the body is safe, but it is also a realm of experiences in the new world.
Yes, totally. It's like an experience, and like the way these spaces are done are they are made for each person to have to carve, to craft their own experience and their own impressions. I, of course, have my memories and have my images, and like I have my compositional intentions, but they are mine, and the other people's are intentions and impressions are also welcome. You see, the way, for instance, Water's Witness is spread on the second floor is an invitation. It's a piece that has no focal point. It's not there's a sweet spot or a specific spot where you can sit and then it's all clear. No, nothing is clear somehow in it. And you have to get closer to the stones, to the metal rails, and like be active yourself in like picking up from this big proposal things that address you. And this is also
Maybe you can explain the idea of this piece to us, you know?
well, yeah, like we had been talking about it the past couple of days. Like Water's Witness is made out of field recordings. It's mainly a work that I deliberately chose to put on the second floor because it articulates the three propositions between the three floors. And recordings of harbors, sounds from harbors, from cities that originally and initially started as being harbors and then developed to being like capitals or yeah, important cities, places like Athens or Istanbul or Singapore or Abu Dhabi, for instance, started as being a small harbor somehow. And it's the relation to the waterfront and to the water activity that made them prosper, that had people like settle in these places, and the growth and social development came from there. So in this exploration, like what I wanted to do is, what the intuition I had, let's say, was to say, what happened to the harbor after all these years of development and centuries of existence? And the observation was that harbors nowadays became like areas that are inaccessible to people. You see, this place that used to be at the heart of life, of trade, of markets, of living areas, is now a place that is fenced, is now a place that you cannot access easily, that you don't go to spend time or like spend a weekend in. And they are like security areas, you see, where you need permits, you need like a purpose, you need like authorizations to be there. And I used the invitations of different art. I kind of used art platforms to have access to these authorizations and to go to these areas, listen to what is going on there. And this intuition was about, if we look at the harbor, we will know a lot about the place. Like really, when you go into a harbor, and this is something that I really observed, you see what a country is importing. And it tells a lot about its stakes. Like if you go to Abu Dhabi, you see a lot of metal rails, you see a lot of glass, you see a lot of heavy materials, of pipes that relate to the production of oil, that relate to this massive construction effort of a city, that place that's still in development and growth. While if you go to a city like Porto, what you see is piles of industrial wastes, of compost, of materials degrading, because now like the industrial production in Porto is decreasing. And so what the port of Porto does is export wastes to Sweden, to other parts of Europe for these to be recycled. So the economical activity is around the exportation of detritus somehow. And Athens is also another experience. Athens harbor was decaying when we went there. Now it got bought by like other concessions and is part of the new Silk Road. But when we went there, the harbor was really silent. Like when we put, like for example, when we record the harbors, we put microphones underwater. We put microphones in stones, in materials we find all over. What we observed in Athens when we put our microphones was no sounds of boats. No sounds of silent waters. The only thing we heard was shrimps, tons of shrimps.
How do they sound?
They sound like...
Do they talk?
It's like fire. It's like fire. They sound like fire. It's really amazing. Actually, this is a funny information. The loudest animal on earth is the shrimp. Really. And it's one species of shrimp called the pistol shrimp. What the pistol shrimp does, this small little creature, it has a claw, and it claps its claw and produces like burst, which energy for a very like small fragment of a second is stronger than the sun. You see, like imagine like the hit of the clamp, bah, they blow an air bubble that kills bacteria and planktons around, and they feed from this. So they hunt with a sound weapon. You see, and so pistol shrimps like cover huge surfaces of sea and ocean grounds, and they are super loud because it's like sometimes millions of these going ta 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 ta, and it's a nightmare when you are recording like in underwater, like, oh my God, the shrimps again, the shrimps again. But it is known to be the loudest animal on Earth compared to its size. Like if the shrimps were bigger, we would be like in deep trouble somehow. somehow. But really, like this was the port of Athens, and we found ourselves like in a very nice situation over there with this kind of silent, still harbor. We were in the bay of the Battle of Salamis. You know the Battle of Salamis? Have you heard of this?
Sure. Everybody knows that.
You know it?
If you have humanistic tradition and education.
So for those of you who don't know, it's this historical battle that happened between the Persians and the Athenians when the Spartans came, and like they were able to counter the Persian invasion. And it is a mythical battle so we were in these waters, and it was then all of a sudden all silent, and the shrimps were there. So that's the remainings of the Battle of Salamis. So like these discoveries and these things tell you a lot about the place, you see, and like from listening to the sounds and like seeing, say, oh wow, I realized like a lot of things. And what happened, to continue with the story of Athens, is that the port, we listen to the port, but we also listen to what is around the port. And in each port you find a totally different ecology. So in Athens, the harbor is very close to the temple of Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, where the myths of Persephone and Hades and all this story of going to the underground and coming back arised. And the temple of Demeter had blocks of marbles like these. And one thing we did, I was working with a sound recordist who is like an amazing person called Chris Watson. He used contact microphones, so microphones that listen to sound in materials. And we listened to the archaeological site through the stone. And I was like, wow, the stone is actually capturing the sounds of the surroundings, or it hears somehow the vibrations in the air and reproduces them with like some distortion, some unclarity, some murkiness that is very characteristic to its materiality. And I was like, wow, why then, if the stone is listening and if the stone has this acoustic identity, why not use it also as a way to play the sounds of Athens through it? And from there started this idea of, from every harbor, selecting a material, a different like a material that struck me while recording, and making it part of Water's Witness and this composition. Thus, these marble blocks that I had the chance to carry from.
And these I-beams, yeah. You have to tell the story of these.
Yeah, the story of these is like related to Abu Dhabi actually, and Abu Dhabi, as I was saying, had all these construction materials on its docks, and in the heat and the sun of Abu Dhabi, these stacks of rails dilatate. You see, metal is very sensitive to heat, and like as you know, it expands, but this is heavy material, so when it expands, it cracks. It makes cracks like the shrimps. Honestly, it's a sound very similar to the shrimps in its nature and texture. And this was also kind of, for me, very intriguing. I never heard metal like in live produce such sounds.
Is this scaring or?
No, it's like really surprising. It's like really being close to a chimney and hearing like fire cracks. Tuck, 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 every now and then. Tuck. You see, so it's like this tiny micro events that have a resonance or have a brightness to them that was quite impressive. And yeah, like every place brought an element, and these elements we see upstairs are coming from Athens, Abu Dhabi, Porto for the compost, and the wooden towers we see, like the columns of wood you see on the second floor, have compost in them, and they have sound in them as well, but there is sound. Vegetation from the surroundings here of leaves and branches and soil, and worms. There are thousands of worms in these columns that are eating all this, and these are like speakers somehow, which quality and acoustics will change over time. What I mean by this is that we put these last week. The vegetal material is still solid, and sound is not very clear. You don't hear them clearly unless you put your ear against the wood. But over time, let's say over 3 months, and actually the museum condition this temperature control is very good. The worms love it. Yeah, they're super active and hyper happy when it's between 20 and 21 degrees, like paintings. So what will happen is that the worms will eat this, and as compost happens, we will go from a solid state to a liquid state. And as we move through this, the acoustic of these towers will become better and better because sound through mud and through water travels much better than through the void and the air that is in between these branches and leaves. So it's like a speaker which quality enhances with time and the composition.
And I like the idea that they are tuned.
Yes.
So actually these are beams, these construction parts and elements, but they are also musical instruments.
Yes, yes. Like if we take sticks and play on them like percussion instruments, they sound in tonal scales, you see, in the pentatonic scale. And what I did, like to find their measurements and length, I took like a beam of 6 meters and said this is an octave, and if I want to go 1 octave below, then then it's 3 meters, and it's the law of Pythagoras, like this equation of like going from one semitone to another that gave me like 4.58 meters, 5.64. I don't remember the measures exactly, but I calculated them and cut them in these scales.
This is a fabulous idea. It's so simple but striking. Maybe we turn ourselves to the other floor. Souffle continu.
Yes.
So it's different. The sound experience is different. The soundscape is different. It's more like an environment feeling. Not so pointed, not so punctual, not so disseminated.
Yes, indeed. Souffle continu, like in English, it means cyclic breathing. And cyclic breathing or circular breathing is a technique that wind instrumentists, yourself,
No, only I learned it's just the ones that have like this double blade, like oboe.
Yeah, yeah.
They can do it. So not the brass, because brass you need too much pressure.
Too much pressure. Okay, so you didn't. But didgeridoo players, for example, do it. You see, like. Many musicians who are used to doing this. So it's like this technique where you breathe through the nose inside and expire, and you can do it continuously. So you can play constant sound through your instrument. So it's this breath that is constantly flowing and producing sound. And I selected this title because on this floor, everything is induced by wind. Like everything we hear is acoustic and is powered by airflows. The airflows are motors that we see in different corners of the space. And these motors are controlled by computers who just like start them and stop them and change the intensity of the air current inside. This is what is happening, but all the sounds are then acoustically induced. And what I'm composing is more airflow than sounds and melodies per se. Like the composition on that floor is in this. And on Souffle Continu, like we have 3 families of instruments. There is this kind of octopus instrument called the organ within, and that's a whole story and something we can talk about. There are these small instruments that you see. There are 6 of them called the reed boxes that are very small wind boxes, and these 2 big units that are the wind houses that are these very bassy, baritone flutes. And I imagined these as units working together. The first piece was the organ, and the organ within is a distortion of the classical church organ that I built on a project I was called Within, and on which I was interested in the relationship between sound and deafness. So it's an organ that was originally made for deaf people to play it. And that organ is vibratory, is tactile. You felt it produces bass, but also the wooden cubes, the cubical wooden flutes it's made out of, vibrate a lot when you touch them. Like you see a red egg on one of them jumping on itself. Like these flutes have air pressure, a lot of air pressure inside. So for a deaf person, they offer a really nice tactile experience of vibration. And as with the wind houses, it's the same component. They all have slides, like you can open and close hatchets that change their pitch. So in opposition to the classical, you're right, to the classical organ pipes that have a constant tuning, these ones have an open tuning, what we call, you can just choose the pitch at which you want them to be. So you can have them very bassy and vibratory if you can't hear with your ears, and you can have them like tonal and phonic if you if your ear functions actually. And the idea of the organ within, like everything I did on this project within, was to bring together deaf and hearing around in concerts or performance situations where the two can play together, and where as a spectator you would not know anymore who is deaf and who isn't. And it's like kind of, again, going back to this idea and principle that we all have a say in sound, and that sound addresses everybody and all approaches are relevant.
And on the top floor, we had yesterday the chance to join one of your performances. You were activating one of your instruments.
Right.
You still can see it just for a few hours left, but then it will be replaced by another soundscape installation.
Totally, yes.
Yeah, maybe you can tell us about this.
So there's a work that is coming here and that will appear here in 10 days. We are starting the installation now, and starting today, I believe. And it is called The Rain. The Rain is a totally different proposition. It is something I started in Korea as an exploration and a revisiting of the Korean drumming tradition, and the idea of percussion instrument that is, as in Korean tradition, as well as in Chinese and Japanese traditions. I believe all of you know, like these taiko drum sessions and rituals where you have people with wooden sticks slamming the drums very strongly and in a very choreographed and synchronized way, and it's like a whole ritual of the sorts that uses intensity and strength and hitting like in a very powerful way. And what I wanted to do when I arrived to Korea was to say, well, there are other ways also to play a drum, you know, with that do not necessarily include the act of hitting. You see, like with some of my musician friends, like who play wind instruments, make me laugh one day. They were like, you know, it's super primitive to see an object, take a stick and hit it with. And this always made me laugh. You see, like this observation of wind players, which I do not approve. You know, I find it really great. But like the idea for me was to say, how can we get sound from a drum without necessarily using a stick and striking its skin? And therefore, this was the start of a conversation with an amazing drum maker in Korea called Mr. So, and who is like a national treasure, who's really a master in drum making. And this man was extremely generous and open-minded because he accepted the challenge of decomposing all the vocabulary and element around drum making. So from the body of the drum to its skin, to the ropes that make it, to the hooks, to all the materials that he uses in his craft were revisited. So we ended up, for instance, on The Rain, and these are things you will see, with drums which skins are made out of celadon, which is Korean ceramics, with drums which ropes are replaced by strings from guitars and cellos, with drums that are made out of furniture textile, you see, and not animal skins. And a whole series of variations on these ideas that where the drums are played not by sticks. We made also a lot of sticks, that you will observe that are made in ceramics, that are made in cotton or in bamboo, in materials that are fragile, that you would not dare to hit with them. So the whole challenge becomes of like, how can I use this and get sound out of it? And what these drums push you to do is to use gestures of rubbing, friction, caressing, and extracting sound in a gentle way from the drum. And from there, also continuing this investigation, there was the role of the four elements of like earth, wind, water, and fire. That are very common in the metaphorical language in Korea and in Southeast Asia of talking about sound and music. So there was a strong connection between the description of, for instance, like a singer's voice and the wind, and like lots of. And I'm not an expert. I'm just like a visitor and a traveler who goes and gets inspired by things. And without being an expert, what I wanted to do is to kind of also pay an homage or like bring these four elements and make them central in the act of playing the drum or getting sound out of the drums. So some of the drums we have on this piece are played by heat, and by heating the surface of the drum and then listening to it dilatate and expand. Or I play it by water drops, like you see on the second floor, that fall onto the skin and like produce a different sound because each drop sounds differently. And again, by wind, by certain drum, which skins are made out of latex and balloons and that vibrate with air. Lots of ideas of the sorts that create like a symphony of drums that play together. A very well composed piece that took me lots of time, and young Kim here from Korea is my friend who helped me a lot with the research around this and the exploration of a lot of these techniques. Then with Vitamin Creative Space in China, we took this project further and developed a lot of things for it. So it was like a long exploration, but very fun exploration of how we can compose something of the sorts and create like again, a very different listening experience from the two other floors.
And you as a public will have the opportunity to listen, and there's a big difference to the other word, just hearing.
Yes.
Listening would be like, I think in German, lauschen or horchen, not horchen and not only hören. So we don't have like in German this difference between these two words. Not really, because you know. Listening, you mean I think it's putting your attention towards something that, and it's your appreciation of, you know, you directed your consciousness, your senses, your appreciation towards you, and hearing is just, you know, a reception of something that.
Yes. No, like you see, like there's this American expression that says, "I hear you." You know, and when somebody like tells me I hear you, I'm like, they don't understand anything. So that's like it's a really like hearing. Yes, it's just like kind of lending an ear in an inattentive way somehow to whatever is addressing you as sound or vibration while listening. And this is something Pauline Oliveros like talks a lot about in her works on deep listening and like these exercises of training our senses and our ability to improvise and play together in the deep listening methodology of what is to listen. Like what is to listen in Pauline's case is deep listening, and I invite you to look at her books, and like her writings on this are beautiful. But the experience with the deaf also for me was very important in the sense of what listening is, because deaf people listen with their eyes, with their fingers, with their bones, with their body, and do not rely on their ears, you see. And that for me like made, as you were saying, like the act of listening of something being multisensorial. You see, if you really want to listen to something, it's not just the attention, like the intellectual attention you give and the concentration you spend. Of course, this is very important, but it's also opening up your eyes. It's also opening up, relaxing your muscles and like letting sound go into you and mobilizing all your capacities in terms of like grasping what is this sound we are dealing with, whether it's a human voice, whether it's an urban sound, whether it's an underwater sound. This is like the great learning I got from the deaf, and that really changed my work and my relation to sound.
Fantastic. So maybe we can open to you. If is there any commentary or
Please.
please, yeah, the opportunity to ask this Tarek. We have to announce that on 24, 25, and 26 there will be a series of concerts, performances. You call it a festival. Tarek invited several musicians to play with him and to activate the instruments he built and which are displayed at these floors. So you're happily invited to join on these 3 days. So we are looking forward to wonderful events.
Yes. Please, if you have any questions, observations, things you would like to share.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for this wonderful exhibition and this talk today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We had the chance before to also like listen in and see the first floor, and I wanted to ask, like, what is your relationship between, or like maybe not really what comes first, but does the sound make the object or the object the sound?
Yes.
In your practice of like, of course, like one doesn't work without the other, but like you decided to have not a speaker, you had it to say like to have the object.
Yes. Well, that's a constant back and forth. It's really nice. Like when I first started sound and music, I was doing electroacoustic composition. I did this for the first 3 years of my studies, and then I was interested by the live aspect, the performative aspect of these music. So from like a sound abstract, time-based, compositional approach, I introduced like the human component and the human factor. You see, like in the early 2000s, like these types of musics were not performative at all. You had like the composer behind like a computer or a mixer and like kind of playing a multi-channel composition that is pre-composed and prepared. And improvisation or like improvisational practices were starting to appear with like real-time technologies and computer and electronics like becoming more and more powerful to be manipulated on the spot. So the introduction of the human. So, and then like the idea of the instrument appeared because I started to make my own computer programs and my own electronic interfaces to be able to improvise and play like experimental and electroacoustic music. So in the beginning, I was like in a kind of triangulation between sound, instrument, and body somehow. And like now, after over the years, like I still feel I'm like in this triangle, except that like maybe it's not a triangle anymore because now the idea of space is also part of it. The idea of also what we listen through became very important as well. And there is no priority. You see, there is not one starting with the other. Sometimes it's an idea of a sound or a certain sound quality or texture I want to bring, and that drives me to start looking for an instrument or a sound mechanism. Like, for instance, on the first floor, as I was saying, I did the organ first. And once the organ within was created, I had the idea of the small reed boxes as a different family of wind instruments with sound and timbres is different from the organ, but that complements it, you see. So there I had an idea of a sound that came from an instrument I had previously done that took me to another instrument, you see. And then from there, like a whole different story unfolds in how you can perform this instrument and where the body comes, and then how you can perceive this instrument and how it sounds in a space. So I really like these negotiations, you see, and these back and forth. And it's not at all about like a flattening relationships somehow, on the contrary. And this is like the thing that makes it a sound journey for me is like navigating between these dimensions and yeah, combining them in different ways in each experience.
Several times you said in the guided tour, there's not just we listen to the objects, but also how you are interested in questions how objects listen to us.
Yes. Yes. Well, this also, this is maybe the second part of answering your question. You know, like some people were asking me the other day, what's the difference between sound and music, you know? And this was like answered by many composers you see throughout time. Maybe Cage's answer is one of the most remembered, you see, after 4 minutes 33, and this idea that any sound can become music as long as, from the moment you introduce the parameter of time, as long as you put things and structure them within time, things become musical. So Cage like kind of exploded this understanding and conception of music by just like kind of making the time factor central and the main articulation. Then composers like Lamonte Young or Brian Eno or like what we have today of all these people doing spectral music and drone music introduced the idea of how you layer sounds in frequencies, you see, and like how without necessarily the idea of time, it's about like having sounds exist together within a spectrum from bass to high frequencies, and like how these overlap and create from this overlapping an idea of time, of like things in phase, things out of phase, and like beatings that like drone and ambient music create, like their own rhythm, but without like a temporal compositional intention. So time, then a spectre, and something I learned from objects like the marbles or objects like what we have on Water's Witness is things become musical from the moment, like, or a sound become musical from the moment you also how you decide to bring it to somebody else. You see, so things are, for me, musical, like let's say the sound of a horn can become musical because you decide to play it inside a water tank, in an underwater speaker, capture it with a microphone and send it to a speaker. And then you hear it through the water coming out to a speaker. It changes it, you see. It becomes something poetic. It becomes like a distorted. It changes your perception of it. Or it becomes also like this idea of putting it inside the stone or putting it inside compost. For me, this is also composition, you see. And it's another layer of introducing, let's say, the perception that I mentioned of perception or the reception of it, you see. Like we are very much used to listening to sound through speakers, but it's just one way for sound to be. And we are used to listening to music, to classical music or rock music inside music venues and like concert halls, but this is one possibility for this to exist. So looking at the other possibilities and playing with them and shuffling them around and finding new ideas and new situations is for me also composition and like making music as well.
And for this, we come back to the very beginning. The architecture is very important.
Right, right. Well, in this, like, well, going back to naive listening, when you do sound art and you study electroacoustics, especially in France, which is a country like here, I believe, that have a large developed infrastructure of venues, of places, of dedicated environments for sound production, let's say, you become a little bit stiff and attached to having these conditions wherever you go. Like you say, oh, I'm an electroacoustic music composer. I cannot show my work in Cameroon because, oh, you don't have a multi-channel sound system. Okay, fine. Well, then you end up not being able to go to Cameroon. You know, fine, why not? That's a choice. But in my case, I was from Lebanon and I studied in France, and at the age of 24, I had finished my studies and I wanted to go back to Lebanon and to do things there. But there was no acousmonium or a multi-channel system. The first time I gave a concert in Lebanon, I had one speaker. So why not? Well, you see, like you learn, like this becomes a constraint and you learn to work with it. It's okay. For me, it was more important to be in Lebanon than to be in an environment that reproduced my music in the best condition and the best rendered it in the best quality I wanted to. So I was willing to sacrifice this. And from the moment I sacrificed this, I was like, this is not important. Lots of possibilities opened up. And I believe today, like in the world we live, many composers have also got rid of this demandingness, you see, of like saying, yes, I want like all these conditions to be there for my art to manifest itself the way I want it to. And I find this a very good situation of dealing with the world, because economically it's very expensive. It's not available everywhere. And this brings us to space and to architecture, because in my case, the reality of moving between the Middle East, and then luckily I had the chance, like at the same time I was traveling in the Middle East, I traveled to the East and to Southeast Asia, and then I traveled to the West, to America and to Latin America. Was put in a multitude of situations of performing in outdoor places, in roundabouts, in courtyards, in theaters, cultural centers, in many places that none of them was like a space meant for music. I found myself, of course, in festivals and music halls, but it was just one out of many possibilities when these were available. So it taught me how to work with space, and how to work with architecture, you know, how to work with public space, private space, and little by little, like, and also a lot working in museums and biennales and environments that were not dedicated for music only. So architecture and space became also a component, you see, of this equation I was talking to about sound, instrument, body, and how you perceive sound, you're definitely immediately talking about architecture. And for me, a stone like this is an architecture. Like sound in the stone is sound in an architecture within an architecture, you see. So the relation to architecture, or architecture for me now is like a musician or somebody I'm improvising with. You see, it's an identity, it's an identity and its own. And my attitude towards it is like my attitude with any improviser or human being or collaborator I work with, is not to clash with them. See, I don't invite a musician and punch them on stage or like kind of erase their sound or like crash their identity while playing together. For me, I'm always playing with the architecture the same way I'm playing with individuals and human beings. So in regards to this and in regards to here, for example, you have to be open and let go of your initial intention and be able to do this dialogue with the architecture. And if it affects your work and if it changes it from what it was originally, so be it. This is the beauty.
So you had the experience with Water's Witness, right?
Oh, totally. And you were there, no? Like 4 days ago, once we finished installing the 2 floors, and I started like playing, turning on all the instruments, I was like, oh my God, like, if I keep things at the levels and in the way I'm used to doing them on Water's Witness, for example, or even with Souffle Continu, visitors here will get saturated in 10 minutes. So I'm like totally out, it becomes meaningless, you know, like you lose all your intentions, collapse. So what we ended up doing, you remember we were sitting on the stone at the entrance of the space, and I said, listen, I'm gonna turn it all really down. So this industrial piece, this heavy, it's not heavy, but it's a piece that has in it loud sound, that has in it harsh sounds and things, were tuned down and turned down so much that they became tiny and minimal and punctual. And it's the first time I show Water's Witness like this. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. You know, like I even discovered qualities that were super nice, like the contrast between this big block of marble and the small sound that's coming out of it, or these like metal rays. So there was like for me, it renewed my experience and my thinking about this piece, thanks to the architecture, you see. So that's also the great challenge. And when people tell me like, oh, the acoustics of this space are hard, and I was like, say, no, there's nothing hard, you see. Like what's hard is like sometimes how we are psychologically stiff and wanting to kind of impose our will on certain elements. Like when I use this stone, I expect this stone to sound like a high quality speaker. You see, it's impossible. So no, I listen to the stone and see what I can do with it. If I want to keep it and work with it. So that's like kind of playing with materials, playing with people, playing with elements, and enjoying the dialogue that comes out of it.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So it's really the experience to listen to you, not just to your pieces and work and spaces. So thank you so much. Thank you also for joining and
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you.